watch display here. Thank you for joining me, and I've had a lot of people on my Instagram asking me to compare my Rolex Submariner, which is a 6-digit, to the newest edition that I just recently got, which is the Omega Seamaster 300 Master Coaxial. So it's kind of the one that looks more like the vintage style diver, no date, sandwich dial. So I decided that I would do a nice little comparison, and I'm not going to say like which watch is better than which watch. More or less what I'm trying to do is compare specs and dimensions of the watch, wearability, price point. I will discuss price point a little bit, but I'm going to discuss a few aspects of dimensions that a lot of people don't really account for, and I think it's a very important factor when deciding if a watch is going to fit well on your wrist. Wearability is my biggest thing, and I'm starting to learn a lot more that numbers don't specifically matter in terms of specs. I mean, certainly I'm not going to go buy a 50mm watch, but what I'm trying to say is if there's a number in the spec list, for instance in the Seamaster Master Coaxial here, it is 14.5mm thick. Generally I would technically stay away from that, especially given my Submariner is 12mm thick. I am kind of a finicky person when it comes to thick watches. I have sold many watches because of how thick they are, and that was because they were thick, but they also didn't have a very good design case for my specific wrist, which I do think the Seamaster does have. So let's go on and kick it over to the studio. We'll get some close-ups of the watches, and we're going to kind of discuss specs as we go throughout talking about the watches. Now I'm just going to point out where I'm measuring. I've already pre-measured all these for the sake of time, so I'm not going back and forth, but I used 2 different sets of calipers to make sure that I did actual manual calipers as well as digital, to make sure that I'm getting accurate numbers for you guys. And I'll give you just a little bit of input, and you'll notice that the Seamaster is not on a bracelet. I do have the bracelet here, but I'm doing that for a reason. So let's go on and kick over to viewing these watches up close and personal, and let's try to see what specs, let's see how they match out together. All right. Forgot to do a wristwatch on the introduction, so I am wearing the 18038 day date with beautiful sunburst blue gilt dial, and of course you can see that this bad boy is minty. Super tight bracelet. It's just an amazing watch. Wears much bigger than the 36mm size suggests. All right. So let's get down to the 2 watches that we're discussing today. So as mentioned before, we do have a 6-digit ceramic. So this is a 116613 LB with the sunburst blue dial. It is a 6-digit ceramic Submariner. And I've also had 5-digit Submariners too, so I have a good comparison to get kind of a good idea to compare this Omega here too. And then we have the Omega Seamaster. It is the Seamaster 300, and it is the Master Coaxial. And you're going to see that I do have this on a bracelet, and part of the, I have it on a bracelet, but I have it on a leather strap. And part of the reason why I have it on a leather strap is so you guys will be able to look at the movement a little bit better later on. It's kind of hard with the bracelet on, and then you can also kind of see what it looks like on the strap. Okay, so first and foremost, let's just talk about what size these 2 watches are. So this one is a 40mm size. Now everyone knows that the 40mm on the new Super Case, so Super Case is in the 6-digit Rolex Submariners, the GMTs, and it's the thicker lugs. They wear a little bit bigger than 40mm. So this is, but technically if you were to measure it, it's a 40mm watch. All right, this is a 41mm watch. All right, and we got straight lugs, kind of pointy, kind of vintage style, almost like you'd see on some of the vintage Speedmasters. Very similar lugs on the first Omega in space, Speedmaster, which is the smaller, basically the small Speedmaster Professional. All right, so let's first talk about lug to lug. So when I'm talking about lug to lug, that's going to be from lug to lug. So these two dimensions, which is a very important part when deciding to wear a watch. You'll notice that like watches that people that might only wear like 40 and 42 millimeters, you'll see them wearing a 44 millimeter Seiko Turtle. And that's because it is a very small lug to lug. That lug to lug is going to span across your wrist, which gives certain presence. Now, I do have a 6 3/4 inch wrist, which is a fairly common size between my buddies and I. A lot of my buddies and I, we all have almost the same size wrists. But just to give you an idea, that's the span of the Day Date, which is a 36 mil watch, but you can see it actually wears very, very nicely on my wrist with the lug to lug. Okay, so lug to lug on this 6-digit Submariner is 47.5. So 47.5 from here to here, all right, on both sides. So it's going to cover 47.5 across your wrist, all right? And these do wear very, very nicely, so it's going to get snug. All right, this one is also 47.5. And I'll have a pop-up throughout the video of the dimensions so you can kind of screenshot it so you don't have to sit here and write it down. But this one's also 47.5 millimeters. So with that being said, these two watches, lug to lug, measure identically. All right, next we're going to talk about lug width. Lug width is between the actual lugs, so what size the bracelet starts when it's at the case. This is a 20 millimeter lug width, right? So the bracelet is a 20 millimeter bracelet. Tapers down very thin, which I really love about Rolex bracelets. You know, tapers very nicely. This is a 21 millimeter. So a little bit strange in my book. I'm not a huge fan of the 21 millimeter. I have tons of 20 millimeter straps. I had Oyster Camu that's on Instagram make this strap, hand make this strap for me, and it looks amazing on the Seamaster. So 21 millimeter lug width. So that means the bracelet on the Omega is 21. It's a 21 millimeter bracelet, and you'll notice that it doesn't taper quite as much as the Rolex bracelet. All right, next we are going to go down to 10 to 4. So when I say 10 to 4, that means from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock. I'm measuring across, and I'm not measuring just the hour markers. I'm measuring the actual case. So from 10 to 4, the Rolex Submariner is 41 millimeters, and that's actually going to be getting just a hair of that crown guard. So it's really probably closer to 40 millimeters. All right. This Seamaster from 10 to 4 is going to be 41 millimeters. Now this one's a little bit more true to size because there are no crown guards, and you can see there's no outcroppings near the 4 o'clock. So they're relatively very similar in 10 to 4 size also. All right. Next we're going to talk about diameter. And that's going to be straight across. So that's going to be from the side case to the crown. I'm going to actually count the crown here. So on the Submariner, with the crown, we got 44 millimeters. That's with the crown, okay? So this is probably about a 2.5 millimeter crown, maybe a little bit more, maybe even 3. But that's with the crown. So 44 millimeters with the crown. The Seamaster is going to be 43.5 millimeters from the side case to the crown. All right, now let's talk about height. So height, I like to do height from the center of the case, of the case back, to the very tip point of the actual crystal. Now these don't really have dome crystals, so there's not going to be too much, but you'll get what I'm saying here in a second when we look at the Seamaster with the display case back. So this is where the 6-digit Submariner really shines. 6-digit Submariner is 12 millimeters thick. So that's including this case back, and it's also including the top part of the crown. Now that is not, I did not measure with the Cyclops. So basically just to the center of the crystal to the center of the case back. So that one is 12 millimeters thick, or I should call it 12 millimeters thin. The Omega is 14.5. So that's to the top of the crystal. Now this one does dome just a hair. You're probably not going to be able to catch it on the video, but it does dome just a little bit. And then the back part of it is a display case back that kind of bulges out a little bit. So you are getting a little bit of glass in this measurement, but it's 14.5 millimeters thick, as I discussed earlier in the beginning of the introduction. So 14.5 millimeters thick, but you will see these lugs are very sloping. So it does wear a lot better. Now this is a big measurement that really a lot of people don't really look at. And this is end link to end link. So end link to end link is gonna, depending on the watch, it's gonna actually expand past lug to lug. So if you notice on the Rolex, these outcroppings of the end link, they actually go out a pretty decent amount past the lugs, which was the lug width from here to here. So this does give a little bit more presence on the wrist, especially like in watches like this, where the double section that this doesn't actually move here, this actually gives a little bit more presence on the wrist because you can only wrap that down so far. So it kind of displays across the wrist. All right, so the 6-digit Submariner is slightly over 50 millimeters, including the furthest most outcroppings. It's basically like 51 millimeters, but it's just a little bit under that. Okay, and this one you're not going to be able to see as much because I don't have the bracelet on it, but imagine the bracelet was on the case here. So basically the outcropping to outcropping where the end links would be, the solid end links would be on this case, is 51.5. It was close to 52 millimeters. So this one does have a little bit more spread when we're talking overall lug to lug end link. So like the end link to end link. All right. And now we're going to just quickly talk about the clasps, which I think is a very important part to review here. So we got the Glide-Lock clasp, of course, on the Rolex. We have the amazing dive extension here that just works amazing. We got screw end links, so we can remove them with screws. It's just one big solid screw. It's like a bank vault, and you got that, it closes, and you close it like that. And this is a very cohesive look. It is a long clasp, but you can see that it doesn't sit up too much more over the actual bracelet. Okay, and then this bracelet we have, it's kind of the older style hinge. It's been like this kind of for a really long time. You get this nice chamfer on each side. I will say the clasp sits very close to the actual bracelet. I mean, it sits closer than the Glide-Lock for sure. I mean, it's almost cohesive. Now, I will say this one has a little bit more of a cohesive look just because it has that through look with the gold. Even the non-gold version, like the one just with the, like just say the black standard ceramic sub, it does look very cohesive. It looks more cohesive than the actual Omega bracelet, but it does look good. It's got nice brushing on the side, twin button push, and this is a really nice. It's not just like stamped. I mean, this is a solid metal. This one does, a lot of people don't realize, this one actually has a diaphragm extension. So you can kind of push this in, and actually this way, you can see I haven't done it too much, and it actually slides down. There's about 4 or 5 different extensions inside of here. So I would say this is probably a little closer to the actual Easy Link in terms of how much extra length you get, because the most you're going to get on this is, let's pull it all the way out so you can see what it looks like. You get that extra extension. Actually looks a lot like the Speedmaster bracelet if you look at that close up. So one good nice thing I will say about this bracelet though is you can do this while it's still on your wrist. So like you don't have to take the whole watch completely off like you do on the Glide Lock. You kind of just let go of the clasp, and you can press up underneath there and extend it. So that's kind of a neat feature. I do actually really like the cohesiveness of this bracelet. It's very fluid. I mean, it just has nice fluidity to it. Drapes really nicely around the wrist. A lot of people don't like the, and pardon for all the fingerprints, these aren't scratches, just, you know, these polished center links are finger magnets. A lot of people prefer this to be completely brushed. I actually really like the polished center links on this. It just gives a little bit of contrast, and then it kind of flows into that chamfer. But it's a really nice bracelet. One downside I will say about the bracelet, you see these are screws in terms of removing the links, but it's a screw on each side. So you basically would undo this screw, you would undo this screw. They're tiny little screws, right? So you want to make sure you have like a little tray or something to catch them when you're sizing it, and then you'll use like a spring bar tool with just like a standard, not the actual forked side, but like just the blunt tip, and you'll press out the bar that's going to be in the center holding these links together. So all in all, great, great watches. I'm not sure what retail is on this watch. I think it's around $6,000, but you can see these trading anywhere in the low to closer to the mid 3,000s on bracelet full set. And of course, these are just getting really hard to come by now. You can get them, but they're actually increasing in value significantly. I'm not going to compare them like in terms of weight, because obviously this one's gold. It's going to probably weigh more. But overall, I think Omega knocked it out of the park with this watch. One thing I will say over the Rolex, and this is more of a personal opinion, I don't like 6-digit Rolexes on straps at all. I kind of like them on the Everest rubber straps, kind of. But with these big chunky lugs, the only way I can really get past those chunky lugs is when it's on bracelet, because it gives you a very cohesive look. It just looks kind of like a nice big block across the wrist, versus this one is a strap monster. Other than the fact that it's 21 millimeters, this thing just looks amazing on the strap, and it actually wears really nicely on the strap too. And as I mentioned before, I really like the bracelet, so it's kind of the best of both worlds. I'll probably wear it equally on both, but it's really nice just to throw it on a strap. Another nice thing about the Omega, you know, is more of a personal preference. For the price point, you're getting a very nice movement. This is the 8400 Coaxial. As mentioned in the actual reference, it's the 300 MC, a lot of people call it, so that stands for Master Coaxial. And it has the liquid metal technology in the bezel. So basically what this is, there's actually, I'm not going to tell you the whole process because I personally don't know it all, but basically this ceramic is heated to a super high temperature, and they're able to somehow enforce metal into there where it almost looks like just one fluid liquid look. And I'm gonna put some macro shots. Like it's really hard. I didn't even know it until I used a lens on this, but the actual markers and the numbers in this bezel almost look as if they're brushed, like this side case. I mean, they're just very beautifully done. And then also you get this sandwich dial. The dial is just beautiful. It's textured. And what sandwich means is, you see those looms, how they're sunken in there. They're actually sunken down. The loom is actually behind the dial, so it gives you a lot of depth. There is kind of a faux patina, which I'm not a huge fan of faux patina. I'd rather it to be real patina, but it's also nice having all the functionality of a modern watch that has a vintage look to it. And it gives you kind of that vintage vibe. It looks well in this piece. Sometimes they're a little bit too faux patina. It's like almost like a light brown to a deep tan. This is just a nice look. The only thing I would change maybe is the second hand here. You can see it's very bright white. It kind of stands out to the other. I kind of think it should have maybe just been silver like the hands. But yeah, it's a very nice And then I just think it's a really nice watch for the price point. You know, for what you get, you don't have to wait on any wait list. It's a great everyday watch. Like, I have no doubt wearing this out. Like, it's a very durable watch. And this one, I'll put some macros of this one. This one is actually an etched bezel, so it's obviously their Cerachrome, which that's basically like Rolex's liquid metal. That's Rolex's proprietary ceramic, and there's actually etching in here, and they actually inlay actual gold. So like on this one, it'll have like it's not only gold. I think there's another metal involved. If I'm not mistaken, it's platinum. But they mix it in there, and it's supposed to last for a very, very long time, and help be corrosive resistant or whatnot. But it looks really, really nice when you zoom in on it. So kind of, this is more of a flush. It doesn't really look like it's like cut out. It kind of looks like it's one cohesive bezel with the numbers kind of designed inside of it, versus these are kind of etched out. So what do you guys think? Like, obviously this one's got gold, so if you don't like gold, you'd probably pick this one. But we're more or less using this as a 6-digit sub. So consider this the Hulk, consider this just the standard black sub. Consider it really any of the 6-digit subs. We're more or less just comparing the overall diver on the watch. So there. Thanks, and let me know in your comments what you think on these two watches. And please go follow me on Instagram at Watch Display. And also, if you enjoyed the video, please support me and subscribe to the channel. It helps out a ton. And if you want to get updates of when my next videos will come out, hit the little bell icon, and that also helps me a ton, so then you always get the latest updates of any content that I'm delivering. And I'm going to make sure that I get a lot of nice macros as well as some good HD shots in here so you can really see the watch. And if you want to see more, just go check it out on Instagram. Again, it's at Watch Display. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, here's a nice little Lume video. I'm in not complete darkness, but pretty dark. On the left we have the Seamaster 300 Master Coaxial, and on the right we have the 6-digit Rolex. So it gives you a good idea of the Lume here. I have not honestly tested to see how long the Seamaster Lume lasts. Obviously, for anybody that knows Rolex, the Rolex will last through the entire night. Maybe I'll try it tonight, and I can update in the comments to see if the Seamaster will continue to have Lume through the whole night.